Well, what I would be, first of all, going to the startup, the scale up the company, is basically doing a brainstorm with them to understand what would potentially be the intellectual property, the new intellectual property that could be developed or which they're thinking about. This is not a formal invention memorandum or anything like this. This is just basically a set of potential ideas which the engineers, the scientists come up with. And then what we would be looking at within that set of ideas is understanding which of those would be broadly applicable to the field that they're working on. Could be standardized technologies in the future. Which of those present real pinch points, pain points for anybody who might want to copy that technology? And based on that survey, we'd then be looking at, will external actors be able to understand the invention? If the case is yes, then that may lead to a patent. If the case is no, because you would never see it outside the fab, for example, then we would say that's going to be a trade secret. And then we would be looking at, let's look at the timeline, let's look at the budgets that we actually have available for patenting. Let's work out where we want to put those strategic assets. Are we, for example, in quantum communication, where a lot of it is going to be based on standardization, and we then be prioritizing filings possibly on technologies that other people are going to be using? Are we looking at some really unique applications, for example, in the field of sensing? Then maybe we would put the priority in those application, those use case patents, because that's where we would get more value from the intellectual property protection. And that's something which I suggest that needs to be a continuous process. It's not you start on day one, do this brainstorm and then leave it. We need to be continually thinking about it, getting ideas from other colleagues in the field, monitoring other people's patent applications, maybe as well as monitoring papers that are being published to see what else is being done in the field, and maybe developing. Sometimes you get a little bit of an idea, the colleague has done this, but let's try it with our technology, and that may actually be a great patent as well. So in the upcoming Quantum Act, what do we really want to see is support for basic technologies from the European Union to support the development of the so-called pilot lines, the manufacturing lines to do it. We need support for intellectual property development. One of the issues with some of the projects that have come out of Horizon Europe is that patents have been filed, but after the project funds have been exhausted, there is no mechanism to continue prosecution of the patents to file for patent protection outside of Europe, for example. So that's one of the things I think we need to be thinking about. We've already talked about the long timelines that quantum technology has. And many EU projects are only 3-4 years in length, which means that you would file the patent maybe after 2 or 3 years, which means that you then have, after 2 or 3 years later, we now have no funds from the European Union to continue the prosecution, and sometimes funds are so limited within public authorities, public institutions, that there is no possibility to continue the patent application ongoing. So what I would really like to see is some mechanism to enable that to continue on. What I would also want to see is within the procurement side, the idea that we could have some procurement, that you procure innovation, procure technologies, and that the companies that are providing that technology to public institutions are able to continue to work and develop the intellectual property within those own companies, and not just transfer it across to the public authority where it may just remain unused without the opportunity for other people to use it. One of the areas that we're also going to have to think about quite closely is on mergers, acquisitions, how companies get together to be able to build up this crucial supply chain as well, and how we're going to work internationally with doing that, with like-minded countries, with countries which maybe share different values than we have within the European Union. That's not so much for the Quantum Act, but that's going to, we know there are certain initiatives within the European Union about European digital sovereignty, for example, which means that we do need to think about how we are going to do this. The last thing I really want to talk about in the Quantum Act is also the development of talent. We are going to need a tremendous number of quantum engineers and scientists within Europe to develop the ecosystem. And it's not just those skilled PhD level scientists, PhD level engineers that we need. We're going to need a lot of technicians who are able to carry out a lot of work on the lab bench. We're going to need a lot of support staff. And dare I suggest it, we're also going to need a lot of more patent attorneys qualified in quantum technologies.